Awesome. So Dan and Nana, I just let you both in, but now I can't see you because we are across a bunch of different screens. So do you want to quickly just say hi, introduce yourselves, and then we will go from there?
Awesome. I will let Nana start.
Well, hey everyone, hope you're well. Great to be here. So my name is Nana Parry, founder of a company called Tectonic, where we help businesses understand the needs of their customers. I've been doing that for last nearly 6 years now. I also run a venture studio, so helping corporates come up with new ideas, launch those new ideas, and basically find early customers. Previous to that, I've kind of raised money for different ventures. Some have worked out, quite a few have not. So yeah, very happy to share my insights, especially around customers and why it's so important to learn from them.
Yeah, and I am Dan, Nana's older brother, but he's the boss. And I am one of the co-founders, and I build no-code products and services to help people scale their businesses cost effectively. And I also run programs teaching people how to do customer discovery and also how to implement some of these no-code tools with their customer discovery in order to figure out who their customers are and how to scale with them effectively.
Absolutely perfect intro for this week. And I'm just going to give a quick shout out to Henna, who's on this call, who actually suggested that we have Dan and Nana come in because she's seen you guys do such a good job on this kind of session before. So thanks, Henna, and looking forward to it. So the talk that we just had that you heard the very end of was just a founder talking about how they went about doing customer discovery, customer insights, and that kind of thing, and just getting those first crucial early users. And so we want to talk a bit more about that. We're in week 3 of the program, and so all of the founders in the cohort are really focused on how am I making sure that I'm building something that my users are going to love? How am I building for stickiness? How am I building to have those very early signs of product market fit? And then at the end of the week, we ask all founders to give us a growth update, and we ask them every single week, how many customers have you spoken to and what have you learned? So this is exactly why you guys are here, to tell people what they should be asking customers so they can make sure that they're extrapolating as much value from those conversations as possible. So to start with, obviously you both think it's really important to be speaking to users because this is what you help people do day to day, but like, why is it so important to speak to users?
Yeah,
I'll start maybe. Yeah. So one of the reasons it's so important is mainly because we just make a lot of assumptions about what our users want, what our users need, even to the point where, if we're honest with ourselves sometimes, are we even solving a problem for them? So the first reason it's so important is to kind of take off the rose-tinted glasses and just objectively look at, is the thing that I'm trying to provide, the thing that I'm trying to sell, is it really going to be of value? And one of the best ways to do that is not necessarily to go with them with an idea and say, do you like my idea? But take the process of trying to gather reliable data to help you as the entrepreneurs who are the creatives. You will creatively figure out how to solve the problem. But getting that insight from customers really helps you develop and go where the market either is today or where it might go tomorrow based on that insight.
Dan, anything to add?
Yeah, and I think ultimately when you're building a product, though you may come up with the idea, you're really co-creating this product with your customers, and especially with your early customers. So building those relationships allow you to have those sticky customers because they care about your success. But ultimately, if you're not solving a real problem, they'll tell you if you ask them the right questions, or worse, they just won't use your thing. And if they don't use your thing, depending on how much time and effort and emotional effort you spent into building this, it may not prove to be fruitful because they just don't care about either the problem that you're solving or the way that you're trying to solve the problem. So it's really important to initially understand if you're solving a problem and then effectively how you're solving the problem for them. I think that's the best way to approach it.
Yeah.
And I guess when you're like, I was going to say, when you're kind of pre-customers, i.e. you're not quite sure who your customers are even going to be yet, but you've got an idea of the kind of groups of people that are going to be using your product. What's the approach there?
Yes, there's a few things. So I will say one of my first businesses failed because I just made massive assumptions about what my customers needed. And the approach that we took, which was in our view the wrong approach, was, okay, we came up with an idea, thought that this would be really useful for them, make the thing, the product or the service, put it in front of them and see if they'll use it. We think that's the way that's backwards. In terms of answering the question, in terms of the approach, it's quite, if I was to do it step by step, but in a summary version, it's basically identify what are you assuming about your customer and who do you believe them to be, and then create questions to ask them that aren't biased, reducing, like, basically not trying to get them to confirm what you want them to say, trying to get quality data. Take that data and look at it objectively and make some decisions, either about the problem that you're trying to solve or the product that you're trying to create. It's all basically about trying to remove bias out of the process and being a little bit brave in how you go about trying to find them as well. It can be a little bit uncomfortable to reach out to people and try and get them to listen to you or get insights from you when you're not trying to sell something. This is purely about what can I learn to improve the likelihood of my solution being successful. So it's all about writing down your assumptions, creating questions, identifying customers. And it's okay if you're wrong about them at the beginning, because you will learn about them and then make some decisions after that.
So a good example is with our music tech startup, we were ultimately trying to help DJs effectively monetize more effectively. So this was about, what, 6-7 years ago. We had this idea that, okay, it takes a long time to upload your mix to SoundCloud and Mixcloud, which is another streaming platform that people would upload their DJ mixes on. So we spent a lot of time, effort, and money building this feature out. We went to talk to them, to DJs that we met along the way, and said, hey, we built this really cool feature that allows you to upload mixes at the same time. And this is why we were building it. And they were like, oh yeah, this is amazing. I definitely want to use this. This would save me so much time and effort. Oh my God, this is great. So we spent a lot of the investment money that we'd raised building that feature out. We launched it, absolute crickets, like nothing, like nobody was using it. And we were like, like everyone said it was a great idea. Everyone like was so excited about it. When we went to speak to the DJs again, just to try and find out like what the hell was going wrong, they were like, oh, the kind of customers that we were talking to, the kind of DJs that we were talking to, don't upload that many mixes a week or a month or a year. So it didn't save them that much time. So we were like, like we probably should have asked the right questions first in order to, like, what is the actual problem that you're having? Because none of them would have said, oh, uploading my mixes takes so long. That's not the key problem that they would have had. Like, so, but going back to Purdy's question, you may have multiple different types of customers that you think might be your ideal customer for you to start with. So you would ultimately create multiple different profiles. So for example, with our music tech startup, you might have your early DJ, a DJ that's doing lots of gigging, a DJ who is technically minded or entrepreneurial. Those are different profiles. And the reason why they're different is because they might have different goals. They might have different behaviors and characteristics. So we always talk about behaviors within the team. A behavior is an activity that they take on a regular basis. So for example, when people are creating profiles, they usually talk about, oh, they live in London and they're like 35 to 45 and they make this much money. That doesn't help you much. It's like, what behaviors are they taking that make them more or less likely to use your product? So with our DJs, maybe a behavior would have been they upload at least 2 mixes a month, for example, and they gig regularly. Okay, cool. That's a behavior that they take, which makes it also, the likelihood of them experiencing that problem would have been higher. And then also the likelihood that it makes us easier to find them. If they gig on a regular basis, okay, cool. Where do they gig? Let's go there. So the behaviors that your customer is taking that makes them more or less likely to experience the problem. So you can actually just go and figure out if they have a problem, because it's an assumption. Even if you made 2 mixes a month, it's not that much time. So you would have found out very quickly, okay, cool, this is not a big problem for this customer type.
That's really This, I don't know if this is actually true or whether it's just an anecdotal story, but I liked it because it proves the point of how you ask questions and what questions you should ask. But I heard this story that Apple were doing a like user insights kind of feedback, and they got everyone together in a group and they were talking about the color of iPhone, and they were like, would you go for a pink one or a green one or a black one or a white one, like what colors do you like? And they got a pretty even split across all the different colors in the user insight interview, and they said, thanks so much for your time, you can pick an iPhone to take home with you as payment. And they had all the colors on the table and people only took the black and white ones and left all the other colors there. And they were like, well, that's just given us everything that we needed to know outside of actually asking them all these questions. And it proves how meaningless the questions even were.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, like when we'll talk about questions in a bit more detail, but people are aspirational by nature. They believe in a better future. They believe in a better version of themselves. The likelihood is that when the iPhone colors were first introduced, or the iPod was first introduced, people thought that they would pick the pink one. But then when it actually came down to picking one, they were like, I'm a black iPhone man. So ultimately you want to understand, either by their past behavior, that's a better indication of what they're likely to do, or actually putting things in front of them and seeing what they actually do. The chances are, though, that Apple have lots of money, so they could probably afford to make lots of different things. But when you're trying things out, you want to try to minimize your risk, minimize your cost, minimize your effort by learning more about their past behaviors, and then put in smaller versions of what you think you could build to solve their problem, and then testing that out. So
I love that, the idea that what people think they're going to do and what they actually do is I like it and I don't like it, because it makes your life so much more difficult as a founder if people are saying something based on what they would quite like to do, but then it comes to the decision and they don't do it. Okay, so questions, like you just said. How do you ask the right questions? I know this is a really broad question itself, but how do you ask the right questions so that you can get as much value as possible from the conversation?
Yeah, so the first thing, I always come back to assumptions. You'll hear me say it all the time, but if you document the assumptions that you're making about your business and your customer, and then you effectively invert those into questions yourself, then you can start to figure out what questions I need to ask my interviewees to get data. So I'll bring it to life in an example. If I'm building a nutrition app or a nutrition product, and I have an assumption that my customer needs to have little knowledge around what to eat to improve their nutrition. If that's an assumption that I have, that my customer needs to have to make it more likely they will buy my nutritional product, then I know I need to ask certain questions across that heading. So for example, do you know how many carbs you're supposed to eat over X amount of time, or are you using any products today, etc., etc. So one key thing to do is document your assumptions and turn that into a question yourself. So then you can start to figure out what you need to ask your customers. The second thing you can do is, as Dan mentioned, focus on past behavior rather than future behavior, because what we underestimate is when we're asking someone, would they do X? You're asking them to imagine where they are at that time, how they're feeling, the potential future, how much money they have, etc., etc. There's not a lot of reliable data in that, but there is a lot of reliable data in things that they have done recently to give you an indication as to the direction of their behavior or the reasons why they took that specific behavior. Another thing you can do is try and remove bias as much as possible. So, for example, don't use words such as that are emotive either side. So, wasn't it tragic that this happened, or isn't it amazing that X happened? If you start to put these words in, it can evoke a reaction that is forced, and actually it starts to muddle up the data as well. But those are three things that you could do. Also, just try and keep it short and to the point as well. Don't try and combine too many questions in one. So wouldn't it, have you recently purchased this product, and why did you do that, and how much did it cost? Too many questions together. So these are some of the things that you could do to ask good questions.
Yeah.
Another thing that's really interesting is oftentimes when we talk about this, people say that, you ask them to write down their assumptions, and they don't write down some things because they're like, oh, they are not assumptions, they are true. I will give you an example of a terrible reason why this is, a reason why this doesn't work. So if I wanted to create my own spaceships to help people get to faraway planets, we know that Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and other rich white dudes are building spaceships. So it's not an assumption that people want to go to other planets. However, if I put up a website and said, hey, you can fly to Mars for £50 a month, like, who's going to sign up to my thing? Just because it's happened for someone else doesn't mean that it's going to be true for you. So there are some things that are assumptions and some things that are validated assumptions and some things that are unvalidated assumptions, even if they are particularly true in the world currently. So you have to really look into yourself and be like, is this actually true? Can I prove that it's true? The other thing to think about as well when you're thinking about your customers is, do you have access to them? So even though I want to create a commercial space platform, I don't have access to people rich enough who would want to fly on my spaceship, and I don't have access to that amount of capital to be able to convert them and convince them that I am capable of running this endeavor. So though something may be true, you have to be thinking about, is it true for you? And do you have access to these individuals in order for you to be able to test this in the first place as well? Mm-hmm. And if you don't have access, that's not a problem. You just have to recognize that you don't have access.
With your spaceship example, if you were asking someone a question to, I know this is quite difficult because we're talking about going in a spaceship, but ask people questions to understand past behaviors to see whether they're likely to be a customer, how would you ask that question in that example?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different ones. You could ask, for example, are they aware of space travel? For example, just one question just around awareness gives you information and data as to whether they are saying that they believe they want to go to space, but they've never actually looked at what's out there. That can give you an indication. You could also ask them, who is currently, as far as they understand, which organizations are allowing, regular people, I say regular people, all regular, but regular people to go to space. Again, it gives you an insight into how much do they really care about these things. So any questions that are really around, how can I understand whether the thing that I believe this person believes is actually true or not based on their behavior? You can ask them if they've entered any competitions to go to space. You can ask them how do they know how much it costs? If they know how much it costs, it gives you an indication that they've done enough research or have looked into something enough because they care about it. You can ask them, what are the differences between what Virgin are doing and what SpaceX are doing? All these kind of questions give you an indication of their where they're at in terms of their desirability for the product or service.
Interesting, because I think one of the things that people always think when you're speaking to users is to ask really open-ended questions, whereas some of the questions that you're suggesting are actually quite like short and concise, and the answer is like quite to the point, just like a yes or a no, or a level of understanding of something, which I've never thought of it that way before.
Yeah, and typically,
calm down.
So typically as well, we might ask for why or why not at the end. So the reason why they're direct, they are, and then with the why or why not at the end, is that it gives you the answer. So you can just say they said no, and then you can say why or why not, which then gives you some of that nuance, because the information that you get from the questions may discount this profile of people that you're talking to, but might lead you on to another profile or individual who may be more suitable as well.
Yeah. And you should, I think, again, it's a really good point, but just to clarify, like, you should also ask open questions if you're trying to understand how they approach things, or as Dan said, why certain things happen. But in our kind of customer discovery work, a lot of our clients, it's basically, they want an outcome as to whether this customer profile is validated or invalidated based on the assumptions and why. so we can give them pretty discrete data to say, based on XYZ, this isn't a problem for them, but this is a problem for them because of how we've kind of constructed the questions.
Yeah. You know how people say that humans generally want to make you happy, and so they're going to give you the answer that they think you want to have. How do you avoid that when you're asking questions?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's called acquiescence bias. I can't say that too often because it's difficult to say. But ultimately, yeah, people want to either usually try and make you happy. So the reason why you ask about the past is because it removes some of that level. If, for example, you say, do you think being fit is really important? People are going to be like, yeah, I do think. But if you ask like a question about past behavior, for example, how many times have you been to the gym in the last month? The answer that they give you might not make them feel like they are a fitness-based person. So, but it'll be a good indication of whether this person or this profile is your customer. If the profile of the people that you've spoken to, if everyone says, oh, they haven't been to the gym in the last month, and you're building a gym, then it doesn't mean that you shouldn't build one, because ultimately that information and some of the subsequent questions that you get and the answer that you get may give you a reason why they might not go. So, for example, the gyms that they have may not give them enough information to make them want to go regularly, or like, I don't know. So ultimately, the reason why we call it discovery is because you're trying to find out information that will lead you on to other things. It's never going to be a closed door. You can just choose to use that information to help you figure out what you should actually do, and if you can provide value for them.
So if they say they haven't been to the gym and then they go, it's because I don't feel comfortable going there, then it could open up a different conversation.
Precisely.
When you've got half an hour of time, let's say, how much of it is you firing questions at people, and how much are you leaving for the conversation to just evolve in some direction? And then how many of those kind of initial conversations do you have that have all maybe gone off in various different directions before you regroup, take trends, and then start again with asking new people new questions?
Yeah, it's a good question. So our interviews are typically, we'd say, anywhere between 20 to 45 minutes. After 45 minutes, you get this kind of interviewee fatigue. So you have to be mindful of the quality of your answers just diminishing after that point. We try and ask 8 to 12 questions in that time period maximum. Isn't always the case, but where possible, we'll do that. But we're able to be that focused because we do a lot of the work up front with the assumptions and figuring out exactly who the target customer might be. I'd say that, yeah, you should be talking the least. You know, someone might say something interesting, remove the desire to engage in tell your version of the story, because that starts to create bias and lead the conversation. Try and ask why. Get used to awkward silences. There's a lot of gold in giving it 2 or 3 seconds before responding, because they might come up with something else. But we'd say, yeah, 20 to 45 minutes, 8 to 12 questions. What was your second part of the question? I can't remember.
And then if you're spotting trends, if people,
Yes.
When you say the why bit, how many kind of different trends are you then gathering before you regroup and start again?
Yeah, so it depends on the questioning, but I would say in terms of numbers of interviews, which might help, if you ask the right questions to the right specific types of customers, and you've laid out things in a way where you can easily say, okay, for this customer type, most of them it is a problem. For this customer type, it's not. After 10 interviews, 10 is actually like a really good number to start with. Now that we do it because we're very specific, after 5 to 7 interviews, we kind of have a really strong idea of where it's going to go. But I would say, you can do it in tens. It's probably a good guiding point to do 10, regroup, look at the data, come back, do another 10, etc. Sometimes it can even be with the same people, because you're trying to understand something specific that they said or mentioned.
And one of the benefits of doing this approach of like actively listening. So most people just don't really listen. So actively listening to people. If someone has spoken to you for the entirety of the interview and you've asked them the questions in an unbiased way, by the end of it, 2 things will happen. they will unlikely know what you're trying to build because you're not trying to tell them what you're trying to build. So you will increase their curiosity. They'll usually at the end of all of our interviews, they're like, so what are you actually trying to do? And then there's an opportunity to build a relationship with them. And again, not trying to sell to them because you don't know if the thing is the right thing. You're building a relationship with them. And then secondly, as well, the benefit of actively listening means that they will genuinely feel warmer towards you because most people are not listened to, which again is an active way of building a relationship with this individual. If they're like, oh, wow, this person just sat with me and just talked about my problems for like 30, 40 minutes. Like they must really care about what they're trying to do, which ultimately you should care about what you're trying to do. So it's not untruth. So yeah, there's really good benefits to being able to ask these open-ended questions and actively listening and not just butting in when you feel excited about something, which is something that I had to learn to do because I get very excited very easily.
And I'm just going to make one final point, which was one thing we forgot to mention to reduce bias is try not, basically don't tell people your idea or your concept before speaking to them, because they make assumptions about what you're trying to get from them. They may not even know that they're doing that, but they are doing that. So where possible, whenever we do our interviews, we don't tell people the idea. And what's really interesting, as Dan said, at the end, after you've listened to them, it's like, okay, so what was this about, for example? And you can actually start to then form a bond where they can become regular interviewees or even like your early adopters for your products.
Oh, another thing, sorry, lots of things, is make sure that you're asking people the same question. Like try to ask people the same question. If they don't understand the question, then you may need to change it. But ultimately, you don't want to ask too many variances of questions because then you're getting variances of answer or interpretations of an answer. So yeah, just make sure that you are keeping those questions the same.
We've got some good questions coming into the chat, which Gigi will go through later. I have a quick question, which I imagine people might be thinking now, which is, if I'm asking someone to spend 20 to 45 minutes with me, but I'm not telling them what I'm building, how do you get people to give you that time? Like, what do you say in that initial message?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a lot of experimentation that we've done with this, but I would say that we ask them for advice a lot. So we'll say, well, we'll typically break it down to 3 areas. The first one is on the assumption that you are a stranger. Number one, you need to create some kind of social proof, some kind of energy of social proof. So what I mean is, hi, I reached out to you because I'm on this particular accelerator, or someone mentioned your name to me and thought it'd be really great to get your insight on XYZ, kind of play into ego a little bit. Normally a lot of people it's still a numbers game, so don't get me wrong. If you don't know your target customer well, if it's in like quite a tricky B2B space, for example, business to business space, you might still have to do a lot of messages or hustle your way to get to these people. But ultimately make it very clear that, first of all, you're worth speaking to, not that you have to make something up, but try and use network social proof where you can. Ask for advice and insight, and make it kind of clear in that you want to speak to them specifically. Like they will give you the insight that you need. That's what works for us when we do it.
And usually as well, what you'll find is in the approach to trying to find an individual, that's an indicator of you being able to find your early customers. If you can't find people to talk to, then how are you going to find people to buy from you? So that's one thing to think about. The second thing as well is usually when you are trying to talk to people, and if it's about a specific problem and it's a problem area that they care a lot about, they will usually take calls because they like talking about that thing. So for example, someone wanted to talk to me about no code stuff or like spicy chicken burgers. I'm ready, right? If someone wanted to talk to me about tax stuff, I don't care, because I don't identify with a problem and I just don't care, right? So even within a group of say 100 people, it's unlikely that all 100 people, even if say for example this call, everyone would be interested in this at the same level, but there's chances are there's 5% of people who really care, and it's about trying to find those people We all know people who love the gym and love talking about the gym, like more than anything. We know that lots of people who just go to the gym. You want to find those people that care about the thing that you're talking about and care about it in such a way that they're willing to take those calls, because they are the people who are likely to try your product and use your products despite its potential flaws, especially when you first start.
You've just exposed yourself a bit there, Dan, because people were asking last week whether there was anyone who really wanted to talk about no code, and we mentioned that you'd be coming in. So anyone that does want to talk about no code, now you know that you can contact Dan, and he's so passionate about it that he'll give you some of his time. Before we jump to the Q&A with the audience, quick few questions. So when you're speaking to your users, is there any point where you think, actually, I should just ignore this piece of feedback?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say if you're confident in your questions, then it's rare that you would kind of put aside a piece of feedback. However, as Dan kind of mentioned, if there's how important is health to you, for example, but then when they start answering questions, it's quite clear that because of this acquiescence bias, they are kind of playing up to it. You could potentially not ignore the feedback, but kind of take it with a pinch of salt type of thing. But that's why we kind of do things in aggregate. So it's when you're looking at the 10 or 12 interviews across, it's rare to ignore it, but you can make decisions that go against it. You are the entrepreneurs, you are the visionaries. You can still look at data and decide, actually, I'm going to do this thing instead. So it's not, the goal is not to get you to, despite whatever the data says, do exactly that. The point of the customer discovery process is to not ignore things that are staring you in the face, or sorry, not to do the activity because you're scared of what it might reveal. Let it reveal itself and then make decisions as a result. But yeah, I think all data is kind of good data, providing the structure of how you get the insight is strong enough.
Yeah. And you kind of mentioned that you can go back and speak to the same user group again if you've asked them a particular question, but let's say you don't need to. What do you think the follow-up should be? Like, when do you then engage those people again, considering they're your potential customers, but you might not have built anything yet?
So,
yeah, Dan, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So the thing about your potential customers is that if you just keep that relationship going, so, hey, like I've just found this really cool piece of tech, like just check it out. So that they know that you are interested in the space still and that you still exist, because people have a very short attention span and memory. So ultimately you want to be like with a good friend. I mean, I'm terrible with my friends, but you want to be sending them messages on a regular basis, just letting them know that you exist. And also then keep them warm so that when you do approach them again, they're not like, oh, I can't remember, or I don't want to do this. So again, it's not really about spamming people. It's not really about like overwhelming them. It's about building actual relationships, because those early customers and early users will likely be the ones who will give you the most honest feedback and will allow you to build something that is genuinely useful. Unfortunately, when you do have these relationships or customers, they might tell you things that you don't want to hear, and that hurts. But ultimately, when Nana and I talk about this on a regular basis, it's about separating yourself from the business. So when they say give you some negative feedback, it's not about you, it's about your business idea. Figure out whether you should take that on board or not, iterate, and then let them know that you've made those changes as well. Like, actually having some humility about this makes people warm to you, because the reality is so many, like TikTok exists. People's attention spans are tiny. So building something useful and sharing it with them and sharing other things adjacent will help you grow your business.
Cool. Last question from me, and then I'll hand over to Gigi. Someone's actually brought up like skewed data. And we've kind of spoken about this already with the iPhone example, but you know, when you do a survey and it's like, how many units of alcohol do you typically drink in a week? And you like underestimate how much you drink, but you like might overestimate how much you go to the gym, kind of thing. how do you ask the question in a way that, because it's someone not wanting to look bad or wanting to look good, that makes them answer it in that way, but then the data is then not that valuable to you? How do you avoid that?
Yeah, so the best way to avoid it is don't assume you'll get all the data you need from one question. So a lot of the work when we're analyzing our data, we will put in questions which are in ways kind of checks and balances, but also aren't answering other questions because they're open-ended enough. So for example, that units of alcohol, someone might underestimate that, but you might be able to ask them other questions that could help determine what's the likelihood of that data being underestimated or not. And you can kind of make that decision when you're looking at the analysis. But ultimately, it's, one of the questions we get a lot is how much will my customer pay for my product or service? You can't ask them direct. It's not good data or good practice to ask them directly, how much would you pay for this imaginary or visual product or service? The best way to do that is to ask them, what value do you put on X type of product that they've hopefully already used? How much does it cost? How long have they been paying for it? Do they pay for it monthly, yearly? Have they ever cancelled? It's actually a combination of the answers to these questions that can help you determine what the actual answer is to what's the range that they could potentially pay for the product or service.
Awesome. This is all gold, by the way. Really tactical feedback. Gigi, I'm going to hand over to you to take the questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think Liv's question was answered earlier, so I'll move on to Haley's question. In a two-sided marketplace, you have two sets of customers. What do you do if your customers have conflicting priorities? This could also apply for monetization. Do you figure out how to charge both or just the hard side? So
Yeah, it's a good question. So with a marketplace, typically there will, and this is based on opinion stroke experience rather than saying this is categorically true, but typically there is a side of the market that you need to engage and retain for your marketplace to be valuable to the other side. So the key is, in my opinion, to determine which side of the market is that, which is you don't have a business without that particular side of the marketplace, and then understand what their needs are themselves. And then the product should mostly be geared to, and initially to onboarding or understanding what is it going to take for the customer side that you need to engage to ensure there is value in your marketplace. What do you need for them to stay and get value out of the product? And then after that, you can determine how that fits with the other side of the market. So yeah, that's, hopefully that answers your question.
And another thing to think about as well is usually having aligned incentives is the key to making anything work. So with a marketplace, let's say we're talking about like an artist marketplace. If you're trying to build something, it's probably because there are people who are looking for art and there are artists who are producing art who want it to be sold. So they want to connect. Making it work for both people is the aligned incentives, right? So they want to find people who will buy their art at the right price. And there are people who are looking for the art. So understanding both sides and understanding what they ultimately want and then providing those things is the key to having not divergent needs, right? But Nana is right, like the hard side of the market, the most difficult part, the ones that your customers are trying to find is the key to building a sustainable marketplace.
okay, thank you. Haley, I hope that answered your question. So next question is from Catherine. I think sort of answered this, but when asking people to complete the questionnaire, what minimum sample size is considered credible for a B2C proposition?
Yeah, it's a tough one because the science on this is varied, and you can start getting into like incident rates and statistical significance, etc. But you're not doing a PhD in research, right? You're trying to get data to help you make decisions. So I would say that from our experience, what we do is at a minimum, we do around 250 responses for surveys when it's a B2C proposition, and we'll do around 50 if it's a B2B, just because of the nature of the market. However, if you only get 10 responses to your survey, it doesn't mean build your business based on those 10 responses, but it does mean you have some data to help influence the direction of your business or the assumptions that you have or who your customer might be. Generally, the more the better. But typically, if you look at the science, anyone that says there is one specific number for one specific type of survey is, in my opinion, is not. It's not correct. You can look at stuff like the Nielsen Norman Group. They're a Scandinavian, I think Danish organization that do a lot of quantitative research and qualitative research, and they have a lot of studies that they've done to help determine, what kind of numbers you should do. But ultimately, treat it as, I'm trying to get insight, and any insight is helpful. The better you structure your survey questions, the less number of people you need to respond, because the quality of the data will be higher.
There's also one thing to think about as well, which is around the decision-making piece. So there's this concept of like type A and type B decisions. And I'll see if I can find the link and I'll share it with the team. But ultimately, most people seem to think that their decisions are irreversible. If I choose the name of my company, I can't go back on it. If I build this product, I cannot go back on it. Most decisions in reality are absolutely reversible. There may be like an element of like, oh man, like I made a mistake, but really and truly, like you can make, like most decisions you can change. So even if you get a small sample set size and you build a little thing based on it and you find out that it's wrong, it's fine. Like you can just change. Ultimately, you're trying to get evidence of who your customer is. Is this the kind of customer that I can actually build a business with? And if not, what do I need to do next? So don't be worried about making the wrong decision. Most decisions you can take back. We changed the name of our business, like what, 4 years in. And we were just like, and there was a lot of like, umming and ahhing, oh, should we do this? Should we not? Nobody cared. We cared way more.
Thank you.
Okay, so next I'm going to take live questions from, I'm pronouncing your name right, Shin? Sorry.
Yeah, no, you pretty much got it right. It's Jin. And I always say it's like the S in casual, like Zsa Zsa Gabor. Those are the people we're thinking of. So I'll try my best to articulate myself, sticking to the 1 to 2 questions. My brand is called Estera, and it's basically about creating inclusive swimwear that actually has supportive elements to it. So it's supportive for all shapes and sizes without being boring at the same time. And I'm actually at this point where last week I've determined I need to start doing things like surveys. And I'm having a bit of difficulty with questions. So you've kind of touched a little bit on an area specifically, like how emotive can I tap into something like body shapes, because that is a very touchy subject with women. So I've just drafted the question as you were talking and feeding. And I was just wondering, what's your thought on something like, how important is swimwear to you in the following situation? Spa, pool, social media, feeling good. Am I going in the right direction by posing a question like that?
If it's a survey, then yes, because generally one thing I should have mentioned as well is when we do a lot of our work, we might do surveys to get like a broad understanding of the landscape and do targeted interviews, sometimes based on that data. So I think you're going in the right direction. Always be careful of questions that start with like how important, because even though important is technically a neutral word, it can come across as leaning one way or the other. So you might want to ask either follow-up questions after that to help them, to help you when they say, okay, it's a 3 out of 5 in terms of importance. You might need to come up with a follow-up question to determine, for example, in what situation, in what situation did you decide to do X or something like that? It's quite hard to say off the top, but yeah, I'd say you're going in the right direction, but have a follow-up question or two to help determine the value of what they said in that importance piece.
Thank you. I've got one last question, and that's actually, how is it like working as a sibling duo? Because that's actually what I'm doing at the moment with my business.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I'll let Dan answer first.
So I love it. I've worked in work stuff for 25 years or so, and Nana is the best boss that I've ever had. I think one of the benefits is that we are so different, as you can tell by our attire and our situations right now. So having a clear delineation of like skills, I think is important. And then also generally having no ego about anything. Like, I don't really care. Like, and ultimately actually letting data be the thing that helps you make decisions, because you can argue about stuff until the cows come home. But if you're like, I spoke to 10 people today and they said that your website doesn't make any sense. It's like, cool, okay. There's no point arguing about it. So yeah.
I'm hoping the differences between myself and my sister will be the same then, because I'm very creative. She's in med school, so this sounds interesting. But
yeah,
thank
that sounds like me and Nana.
Awesome, thank you. So Maria, are you there? Could you please turn on your camera and ask your question? You're on mute.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Hello to you all, to Dan and Anna in particular. So I have a question that is a hybrid between a question and a consideration, thinking out loud. So returning to the point of the customers and their past behaviors, especially in this very particular timing where we are facing a pandemic and now a war, what has been the biggest challenge and the biggest changing that you apply to your company in order to match all this quickly changing in the timings that we are facing right now? Just to tell something about my background, I started setting up a film production company, and now I've ended up with a metaverse hard tech startup. So what is the best way to make ends meet between the customers changing and not destroying a startup DNA?
Awesome, thank you, Maria. So I think, at least for us, if you talk about our business and the things that we've been doing, the nature of what we do is when times are good and when times are bad, change is constant and your customers are always changing in some way, in some fashion. So for us, when the pandemic hit, for example, we recognize that, okay, people's budgets are going to probably be cut. And therefore, what they do with that money becomes much more important that it's successful, especially when it's to do with external spend. So we honed in on innovation is the most important. Some of the best innovations come out of difficult times, but it's really about understanding who those people are and what their needs are. So we tied ourselves to innovation companies. We basically changed strategy, tied ourselves to innovation companies. So that's one thing. I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
Yes, it was more about a company DNA. So when it is important to change your company vision in order to embrace all the use changing that we are facing, and when it's important to stand up and to keep moving on with your values or ideas. Yes.
I'm with you. It's a philosophical question in a way, so I don't know if we have too much time for it, but I will say that, at least from my perspective, your vision shouldn't change. How you get there might, depending on the data that you receive and how the macroeconomic factors affect how you change. So we all have beliefs and philosophies, and most of them after a certain amount of time are fairly hard coded in us. If we believe that we want to help people in a certain way, that's up to us to determine how we do that for it to be viable based on our own personal goals. So I would say the vision shouldn't change, but how you get there, use data to mold your way to it.
Yes, thank you very much. I
You're
understand
welcome.
your point.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to take a question from the chat. Ati, you asked a question about how to understand past behaviors. Do you want to ask that live, or I could move on to another question?
It's okay. Thank you, Gigi, but I think that's probably been answered. So
Yeah.
I'll pass it on to the next person. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So Haley's question is there a formula for the recommended split between qualitative and quantitative research with customers? Qualitative is generally better, but more expensive.
Dan, do you want to take it, or?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the way that we generally approach it is the qualitative interviews that you get forces you to do certain things. Find people to talk to, which is data in itself. Get them to talk to you and then use the information that you get to help determine a number of questions. The information that you get from a qualitative interview is usually richer because you're asking more questions, people are giving more answers. In a survey, people are less likely to give better qualitative answers, and it's easier to get more discrete information. That's usually if you get people to complete it. So I tend to prefer talking to people first, especially in this process, because you are getting richer data, you're building better relationships. I think, and I'm a bit biased in this, but I think people use qualitative surveys because they're like, I'm just going to put this out there. If no one responds, then it's not really a thing. Whereas if I said, go and find 10 people to talk to see if people care about your problem, that's a much harder thing for people to consider. The reality is that you'll likely get more information about what you're trying to do from those 10 people than if you just put a survey out and hope that people sign it up. Because much like someone mentioned in the chat, the mum test, you might get friends and family or people that don't really care about the problem just writing stuff. So with surveys, you'd have to ask enough questions to be able to qualify out people as well, because not all the information that you get is going to be useful. If I ask people about the gym and then you ask a bunch of my friends, not many of them go to the gym. So they might put information in there that I need to then say, okay, these 10 interviews are useless. Whereas if I go to talk to people at gyms, I'm much likely to get richer information. So there's not really like a maths mix. It's more, again, like Nana was saying, this is all just information to help you figure out how to make a decision that, again, is reversible. So if you're wrong, it's fine.
Yeah, there are very few companies that can do studies with actual statistical significance because they have the budget to do so. There are very, very few out there. So yeah, just get as much data as you can.
Awesome, thank you. So a very quick question from the chat to Dan. What is your favorite no-code platform for a mobile app?
So yeah, I think I put a message in the chat there's one called Flutterflow, which is quite new, which is a tool for building mobile apps, a no-code tool for building mobile apps. However, one of the things that I would urge against is actually building a mobile app. If I asked you right now how many apps you use on your phone, most of you probably say 4 or 5, right? Like the reality is that most people don't actually use that many apps on their phone outside of the main social media ones. So what you'd want to typically do is actually build what we call a progressive web app, or just have a website and get people to log into that and use that. And then once you've got enough data on how people use it, then you can build a mobile app. But the one that I'm looking at is Flutterflow. And then there's another tool called Glide, which allows you to build progressive web apps, which I shall put in the chat.
Awesome, thank you. So back to live questions. Christina, please could you unmute and ask your question real quick? You're on mute, sorry, can't hear you.
My bad. So we worked really hard to get a group of potential users for our beta that we're getting ready to launch. And I kind of done some qualifying, well, a lot of qualifying questions during COVID regarding our virtual racing technology. So I'm in sports tech. And what I want to ask now is like an open-ended story question. I just want to get feedback on what you think of that. So these are people that I've either sent a survey or had initial conversation before. They've used a virtual racing that went to market early COVID that completely bombed. Most of them complained about it, so I kept them on my hot list of users. I just wanted to like say, hey, tell me a story about, it's been a while, tell me a story about the last time you did a virtual race or were in a virtual community around sports. What was that like? And then kind of, I guess, get themes or my next step from there. What do you guys think of that?
I mean, yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think it's about where you're starting from. So if you're in really discovery mode, as in, okay, what are they doing? Where are their heads at? What are they, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That kind of open-ended is great, because once you get those stories, you will then be able to refine where you need to go next. So yeah, so that's totally fine. When you do the open questions, you end up with a lot of, okay, so why, so why not, and there's lots of gold there as well. So yeah, I think that's nothing wrong with that approach at all.
And one thing as well to think about is, it's again unlikely that everyone will respond to you. So the people that do respond to you are likely the people who care the most. Which are the people who you want to build better relationships with. Because as I mentioned before, like if you've got a list of 100 people, like there's only going to be a few people who are willing to give things a chance. Like there's a million no-code tools out there. I don't talk about all of them. I've probably tried them, but I don't talk about all of them.
Thank you, Golden. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay, so Kofo, please, could you ask a question?
Yeah. Hello guys, thank you so much for today. It's been really, really useful. Yeah, we've conducted about 60 interviews. Basically, we're working on this digital health app. It's a two-sided marketplace comprising of enterprises and their employees, and then healthcare practitioners who will basically be connected with the employees of the enterprises. So we've conducted about 6 interviews with enterprises, a number of interviews with healthcare practitioners. And essentially my question is around one thing, something that you raised about asking people how much they would pay. We have actually asked that question, and the reason why we did that is because we tied that question to how much revenue we would generate for them on the platform. So we said, for instance, if we generated, say, £10,000 additional, say additional £10,000 per annum, would you pay X amount for this? And if we were able to double that, would you pay Y amount? So I just wanted to find out whether or not that is a fair question or an unbiased question to ask, because we want to basically get an understanding of how much revenue we would generate for the platform to be of value to healthcare practitioners who are typically sole traders or small business owners. That's one question.
Cool. I will answer very shortly, in a short way, because I have to go. I've got another meeting at 4. But basically, I will say that anything around price, it's really to determine a range or potential value, but ultimately, until they actually transact, that's the biggest evidence you have that someone will pay something for it. So I would say it's best still not to ask like how much would they pay for X if X isn't real, and for you to rely on that data, and then as a result price your product in that way. But if you use it as a way to inform you in relation to other behaviors and other types of products and value that they have, it can give you an overall picture, basically. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Basically saying, don't just say, okay, because it's that, this is how much we'll be able to provide you in value, but you can see what their reaction to that number is, to give you even more data as a result.
Yeah, Yeah, we're comparing it with competitor. We're using competitor data as well, but we just wanted to ask as well, yeah, to ask the question as well. We wanted to essentially tie the question to the potential revenue we could generate for them. Okay, and the last question is around the
Oh, hey, sorry, I'm just gonna jump in for a moment. I know Nana said he has to jump off for a call. So we'll, Dan, if you've got to depart, then
I can stay for a few minutes.
Yeah,
thanks, I appreciate that. Thanks, Nana.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, the second question that I wanted to ask is around the enterprise side. So basically, with regards to the enterprises, we've managed to introduce 6, like I said, and we've had positive feedback from them. My only bugbear, I'm not sure I should say this, is that they don't seem to be aware of, well, they are aware of health and wellness, but they don't seem to be tracking, say, for instance, lifestyle diseases within their organization. And one of the reasons why we set this all up is because of market research that secondary market research that was conducted by well-known journals, which essentially stated that preventable lifestyle disease was having a huge negative impact on companies. So basically, you know, their employees, if they, for instance, were receiving if they were receiving health insurance from companies, they would expect their insurance premiums to increase, and it's costing companies between £3,000 to £15,000 per annum, depending upon their industry. So I was thinking that based on research, well, the feedback we're getting from companies, because there doesn't seem to be this huge awareness around the potential impact that this is going to have on their organizations, maybe we should run some sort of, say, wellness programs, not wellness, events, to raise awareness about the issue for these companies, even though they have.
Sorry to cut you off, but like, could you like?
I think I've got the an answer that will be useful for everyone.
Yeah.
So ultimately, what you're saying is that there doesn't seem to be much interest in what you're trying to sell.
No, there is interest. There is interest. There is interest.
Okay.
Yeah, so there is interest in what we're trying to sell from enterprises, though there's a lot more interest from healthcare practitioners, significant interest from the healthcare practitioners. There's a lot of interest from healthcare and from enterprises, but wellness seems to be positioned as a broad term. There doesn't seem to be specific focus on, say, obesity, type 2 diabetes, etc. And that's going to have a significant material impact on companies monetarily. There's been research conducted in the US that demonstrates that it's having an impact, but that research isn't available in the UK, so they don't seem to be aware of this.
Okay, so there's this concept that we came across when we were first starting Tectonic, which is ultimately there's something that we've labeled the education gap, which is the difference between what people your problem that you're trying to solve and whether people have any awareness about the problem or have any desire for it to be solved. If people don't know about the problem, then you have an option: either find people who do know about this problem or choose to educate these individuals. The thing with educating these individuals about this problem is that it costs, whether it's time or money and effort. Once you have educated them, then now they are aware of this, they have options, which is to either go with you or then do their own research to see if there's anything else out there. So you've got that option there. The other option, though, is to go for people who do know about this problem and do care about this, which then lowers your cost potentially. The issue is you have to find those people, but the chances are once you found those people that do care about the problem and know about it, then it's easier to sell to them because you're not trying to convince them that the problem exists. You're just trying to say that you have the solution for them. So you have an option, which is choose to educate them and then try and convert them, or find people who care about the problem and then convert them. it's an option. I generally prefer to find people who care about the problem and who know about it, because it's an easier, it's
Yeah.
easier. It's not more difficult to find them, but it's easier.
Yeah, they do care about.
Okay.
Oh, I think you're on. Mhm.
So
sorry.
folks, I have to round off here. So one last question for Dan. Please, what's the easiest way to reach out to you if you have
Yeah.
any?
Yeah, sure. So the easiest way is probably LinkedIn. Yeah, if you just find me, I think they will share my LinkedIn details there. I'm also on Twitter infrequently. I'm trying to improve. But yeah, most of the time, probably easiest to get out to me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm over to Nana Parry now. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Dan. And please pass our thanks to your wonderful brother as well.
Yes, I will do. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.